Good to go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, welcome. Welcome to the evening's Committee of Adjustment meeting. The Council of the Municipality of East Ferris has empowered this committee to make decisions on minor variance consent to several applications on their behalf. The committee is made up of 5 citizen members and 2 members of council. The members are as follows. Frank, would you start off?
Corbio.
Lauren Roy Akers, I'm on council.
Greg Curtin, staff representative.
Carrie Hansen, I'm recording clerk.
Steve Hosting. John Simmons.
Bill Boak.
I'm Terry Kelly. I'm on council as well. Welcome, everyone. I'm sorry, Tara, pardon me. We saved the best to last.
Tara Mishaville, I'm a community member.
Thank you. As required under the Planning Act and pursuant to policy, the committee is holding a public meeting prior to making a decision on the proposed applications. The Committee of Adjustment has not yet made any decisions on these matters, and all comments received prior to this evening's meeting, as well as comments received tonight during the meeting, will be considered in the decision. The committee makes our decisions based on the criteria outlined in the Planning Act that corresponds to the specific application type. The process will be as follows. I will ask the applicant to present their application in the order listed on the agenda. Committee will ask any questions they have of the applicant. Staff will provide their comments about the application and give an overview of correspondence that's been received. Members of the public will present and answer questions if needed. We allow for a 10-minute maximum time limit on all public comments to the committee. We will then move to a motion to approve or refuse the application. We'd ask that everyone be respectable and their presentations and comments should be directly related to the application. If any committee members have a conflict of interest with regards to any items on tonight's agenda, would they please declare it now? We will now move and open the meeting. Can I have a motion to call to order, please? Frank Corbeil and Warren. All in favor? Moved. Can I have a mover and a seconder for the adoption of the agenda, please? John, Bill? All in favor? Accepting the minutes of the previous meeting, can I have a mover and a seconder, please? We've got Bill and Warren. Any business arising for the minutes in the committee? Seeing none, disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. And seeing none, moving along. I've had my comments, ratepayers delegation. And seeing none, we'll have the first public hearing, please, which is A 2023-08, Glenn and Karen Brophy, 214 1 Mile Road. If someone, please come forward. Thank you. The applicant's requesting a minor variance to permit a reduction in front yard setback to 2 meters, whereas zoning bylaw 2021-60 permits 8 meters. Welcome.
All right, thank you for this opportunity. So we're interested in reducing the length of the driveway to a garage across the road from my house. The way the road is situated currently is there's a 66-foot road house, and most of the traveling portion is very close to my house, current house, and there's 50 feet from the edge of the traveling portion to the road allowance. The currently planning requirements are that I go 8 meters beyond that. And I'm asking to have it come back to 2 meters. Mostly because there's that much ditch, if you will, before it gets to the section where is the property. The intent of the 8 meters is to keep it hidden from traffic. And so effectively it would be from travel portion, it'd be about 45 to 50 feet near the travel portion, plus on the 6, we go 55 feet into the onto the away from the travel. So it's just basically to keep my driveway short, so I'm not going to long-term maintenance. It's the reason why.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from any committee member?
Is 1 Mile Road private?
That's a question. It's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question. I know. I know.
Going on 1 Mile Road.
There is.
There's 25 lots, I believe, 3 are adjacent to Centennial, the rest are on 1 Mile Road, and there's a subdivision going off, if I'm not mistaken, to the left as you approach. Right?
Yes.
But it's about halfway down. After that, I'm not sure Answer the question. It's private, okay. So it's like a lot of the roads in East Ferris. It comes off of municipal road and turns into a private.
So if it is a privately owned road, then somebody owns it. That needed everybody else.
So I don't even give me like comments, clearly, but my understanding.
Staying private, as implying the maintenance aspect and all the work on the road is done privately by the residents. There's a bigger kind of question at play, and that's what I think Mr. Brook is referring to as far as like long-term aspect of what the road should be. It's all municipally owned road allowance, privately maintained.
That kind of answers the question as to the allowance.
And there's a road allowance down towards the lake. Because as we know, road allowances weren't nothing to do with roads.
Yeah.
They were giving access to the lumber barons back in the day. Any other questions, Mr. Brophy? Okay. Could you give a comments, please?
Sure. So for this file, we received correspondence from both the Ministry of Transportation and Hydro One stating it was outside of their jurisdiction area. We also received comments from the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority. They have no concerns. This is a bit of a unique scenario. So some of you, especially those of you who are on planning committee last term of council, would remember the 1 mile Centennial McPherson subdivision project that came through. So through the process, it was decided that a number of small blocks of land on 1 mile road would be set aside to be essentially merged on title, basically, or legally merged with properties on the other side of 1 mile road. So you have the strip of lakeside properties, one of which is owned by Mr. Brophy, and a number of his neighbors. They have purchased blocks on the opposite side of the road that will be bound to their property. And the intention with that was to allow them more storage space, somewhere to build an accessory structure, etc. They aren't allowed to have a second dwelling on that parcel of land. It's not intended to be for that. So basically, when we're looking at the minor variance request, you're looking at a reduction from 8 meters to 2 meters for setback. It seems numerically significant at first. But you want to consider kind of the intent of why that setback is greater and what the impact of reducing it would have. Generally speaking, our bylaw requires that a setback for an accessory structure meets the setback required for the main building. And the reason being is so that you don't have accessory structures in the front yard, garage plopper in front of the house. It kind of detracts from the general residential character of the reason to have that increased setback kind of disappears to some extent. That in conjunction with just the distance that Mr. Brophy highlighted in his presentation, you're already looking at a very significant distance from the travel portion of 1 mile road. I think it's appropriate based on the fact that the intended use of this parcel was for an accessory structure and only for an accessory structure. So I mean, for those reasons, I think that it does generally meet the intent of our policies, and it is really appropriate and desirable for the parcel of land.
Just out of curiosity, more than anything, in the future, if this was a maintained road by East Ferris, other lots that have been created, there was a certain allowance given to the city for proper road.
Because of the fact that it's a municipally owned road allowance, if we ever took over maintenance and say expanded the road to a different width, we would still only be expanding within that existing road allowance width. So there's still the 2 meter setback that's maintained from that lot line through this proposal. And then we would think about would they have any future impact? Well, no, not really, because the intent of that parcel is still the same.
Is there any, that's closer to the road, the structure will be close to the road. So let's imagine that it was a garage and there was a car.
Yeah.
And then you're driving onto the road. Is there any rules restrictions about pulling out onto a road so that you can't see? Are we breaking any of those rules?
We don't have anything in our bylaw about like the distance required from the front of a garage to the lot line or anything. So sometimes you'll see municipalities will do things like 5 or 6 meter setbacks from the front of the garage face to ensure that there's room for a vehicle between the lot line and the garage or something like that. We don't have anything like that. I would also be a lot less concerned with that in this circumstance because of the nature of 1 mile road. This is about halfway down. You probably only have a dozen lots after this. And the road is narrow and not likely to be expanded to be a major road at any point ever in the future. So I don't think you have that kind of conflict of potential traffic.
No, it's just I went and saw it, but I was like,
Yeah.
You pull it out, you can't see.
It's a dead end road.
yeah, I know, but if you're pulling out, someone's come on, you can't.
I think most people slow down on it. I know after the curve, when you go down to the lake, when you hang the left, things get pretty tight.
Yeah.
It would make no sense to go anything more than about 20 clicks.
Yeah, I just didn't know if there were any rules for that.
Yep, no, good question. Thank you.
I do have one question, Glenn. You were mentioning to reduce the length of your lane.
Okay.
Now, is that because of the amount of property to the existing road?
Yes, yes. So 40 feet to the travel portion now. And then, as I said, it was 6 feet in, so we gave it 2 meters. So if I went a full 8 meters, it's way further back. More expensive, more plowing.
Yeah, I would just,
That's the reason why.
Yeah.
The other thing I should mention is I think there's 5 properties past our place.
Right.
And it's basically 1 lane wide.
Yeah.
Through that whole section of the houses. That's all the width of it is. So it's very uncommon to have back traffic. We don't want that traffic.
Driveways become the passing lane.
Yes. Same as the movies.
Exactly. Any further questions? Seeing none, is everybody basically in agreement? We're looking good. Could I have a motion to accept this? And Bill? All in favor? Passed. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
The next is B 2023-17. Steve MacArthur on behalf of Tulloch, on behalf of Moras, 802 Centennial Crescent. The applicant's requesting a consent to sever for the purpose of creating 1 new lot, 280 meter frontage, 27.5 hectares lot area. And there you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Welcome. How you doing?
Good, yourself?
Good, thank you.
My clients are here behind me, Larry and Shirley, and they're looking to basically create 1 new lot, frontage on Centennial. Subject property is 38 hectares in size. I'm not sure, Greg, if they're related to any of these final justification reports. Figure 1.2 shows that these properties have actually merged on title. So they're all one large parcel at this point. But conveniently, there was a reference plan done some time ago that identifies the portion that is being created here as part 2 on that plan and to be added to a substantial piece on fronting on Centennial. So both parcels, there's over 900 meters of frontage on Centennial where this will be created. So they'll both exceed the frontage requirements, they'll exceed the size requirements. And at this point, the intent is to transfer to a neighboring friend, and he has no immediate development plans on the parcel. Recreational use, personal recreational use. And in terms of the policy review, the provincial policy, as I'm sure the committee is aware, encourages these infill opportunities where there's no requirement for the expansion of municipal services or infrastructure. So these roads are already plowed and serviced and so on. And this represents a kind of infill opportunity. Quick review of the official plan also talks about that both the proposed and retained parcel will front on the existing road again, Centennial Crescent. And required 60 meter frontage is exceeded. And the lot area as well as well beyond the 0.81 hectares required. And they will have individual on-site water and sewage disposal systems that would be required with any building permit. Maintains the rural residential character of the area. Represents a good opportunity to have some new future construction in Centennial.
Okay. Thank you very much. From the committee, any questions? Seems pretty straightforward, a lot of land and pretty straightforward. Too. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? I'm sorry. Seriously, what?
That's
You're
okay.
not even on screen.
I'll keep it brief. He has no concerns due to the size of the parcels. They say it'll be no problem for septic systems. To my report, I have very little to add beyond what Mr. MacArthur said. It complies with all of our policies and I have no concerns.
Very good. Anybody from the public have anything to say or add? Seeing none, can I have a mover and seconder, please? That's Steve and Frank. Tara, you're okay with it? Very good. All in favor? Passed. Thank you very much. Next is Mr. Paul Goodrich on behalf of Mark and Donna Carrier. File A 2023-09 and B 2023-18. Having to do with 114 and 134 Eglinton Road North. Applicants are requesting a minor variance to permit a reduction in the required frontage to 20.12 meters, whereas zoning bylaw 2021-60 requires 60.0 meters. The applicants are currently requesting a consent to sever for the purpose of creating one new lot.
Good evening. Thanks very much. Good evening, everyone else. Here this evening representing Mark and Don Carter as announced. Mark Carter is here this evening in back row. So what we're looking to do is one lot that's just a little over 2 hectares in size, roughly 5 acres. It's a bit of a funny shaped lot, as you can see from the sketch. The previous house was just a year or two ago. The configuration of that also was to accommodate a pond that was in the back of the property. Because of where the garage and the house were, we made sure that there was still a 66-foot strip or 20.12 meter strip at the front of the property. On the one side, we had to accept the 60-meter frontage on the other side. Of course, if severance is approved, the severed lands would have the 60 meters of frontage, plenty of room to build, lots of acreage, and Mark and Donna are planning on building on the retained lands. And then, of course, then that requires the minor variance down to the 20 meters. So it was always contemplated that at some point in time there would be most likely a road pushed in this area if there was going to be any development of the rear portion of Mark and Donna's property, or in fact, I've also spoken with the owner to the north who's potentially interested in doing something in that regard. And it's progressed to the point where actually Mark and Donna shifted the original positioning of their home slightly east, so that if a road was constructed in that location, they would be able to meet the minimum frontage setbacks. So although it's a little bit less on the frontage, their proposed dwelling is going to be well at the rear of the property. Now, the land is heavily forested, so even with the neighboring properties to the east, even if they were to look out their back windows, both with the forest conditions on their own lands, but particularly on Mark and Donna's property, they won't see Mark and Donna's house from their property. So it won't feel like somebody is built in their backyard on this location. It's about it. Other than that, like the only variance is the frontage requirement. The area is very much well in excess of the minimum on both Severn and the retaining. If has any questions, be happy to try to answer.
Questions from the committee? A lot of land involved once again. Sorry, but 5 acres. As far as the severance goes. Staff report, please.
Sure. So we received comments from the MTO and Hydro One again, not within their jurisdiction area, and they provided no comment. We did receive comments from North Bay Ottawa Conservation Authority. So the Conservation Authority, we received these comments today, so they weren't circulating your package, but they have no objection in principle to the severance. They highlighted the fact that there's adequate room for septic systems on both the severed and retained lands. However, they did highlight that there's been significant alteration to the landscape, including watercourses on the westerly portion of the property. Now, this area does actually fall within a bit of a strange kind of middle area that is not covered by Conservation Authority jurisdiction. There's one small area in this part of the municipality that's not covered. It does default to M&R jurisdiction though, and the municipality has adjacent property that is being somewhat affected by this as well. So the Conservation Authority basically just wanted to bring it to the attention of the committee and staff that they will be following up with the M&R, and that they don't believe appropriate permits were done to do this modification to the watercourse. So we'll be following up with that with the appropriate regulatory bodies following this meeting, regardless of the outcome. So, as far as staff comments go, this is another example where you have a fairly significant numerical change with regards to the minor variance. It's a bit of a unique situation in the sense that the 20-meter frontage that's there was going to serve as the access point to the lot. Regardless of whether it's severed or not, it's the spot that makes sense to access the majority of the lot, and it was kind of always going to form the location of the driveway. So in some ways, you're considering whether or not the other portion is also appropriate, which the other portion has plenty of area, plenty of frontage to meet our minimums. It is a bit weird if you're putting these type of like flag lot configurations into an area that has a very regular lot pattern. Like say you take a subdivision that was specifically designed in a way like, let's say Tread Lightly just down the road. It has an extremely regular lot pattern where they're almost all the same frontage, and they're side by side, and you have that like uniformity. When you look at an area like all the lots around here, we have multiple other examples of these type of flag lots that wrap around lots in the back, lots of different lot sizes, lots of different lot configurations. And the fact that we're working with so much area here and it's all heavily forested, and if spot where you would put a house would be basically unnoticeable by any of the surrounding lots, I think that kind of gives it a bit of a unique characteristic that makes you think that the minor variance is probably appropriate in this instance. And that's why we need to always look at these on a case by case basis, because there are examples where something like this would not be appropriate. But I think in this specific case, the severance is appropriate in the minor variance. It meets the intent of our policies.
Any concerns by the committee?
So I guess sort of a question, it's the only way that it comes to my mind. Why do we have a 60-meter frontage requirement?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's primarily because you have to set a standard somewhere, and you want to set a standard based on what type of frontage will form the appropriate lot pattern in a normal circumstance. So if you're designing a row of houses in a subdivision, say from scratch, and we know that our bylaw says a 2-acre minimum, a 60-meter frontage represents a general frontage that would normally create an appropriate shape size lot if you're also meeting that 2-acre minimum. So it's kind of like the average standard you would expect for a new development that you're planning from scratch all the way through. It's not always going to be that way in existing scenarios. And when you look at a number of the lots around here, there's lots of lots that have 30-meter frontage in the immediate vicinity. There aren't any that have 20 meters. This would be the narrowest one. But a lot of the ones that have 30 that are around are also half an acre. You're really small, really differently shaped. So I think that this one is kind of mitigated by the fact that there's such a wide variety of lot shapes and sizes around. And this one has so much area to accommodate a house in the back that it in some ways mitigates the frontage concerns in my eyes.
Is there any concern about setting a precedent? If it's the lowest one, no, I agree.
Exactly, yeah, because, very well studied guys like Paul and the likes that represent folks will look at history and say, well, you have done it before. And I'm not opposed to this. I'm always looking at that kind of piece that you're saying.
We're going from 160, 170 feet down to 65 feet.
A third of the requirement.
It is. I mean, there's always the potential that something like this could be used in the future, that someone points to and says, you've used this before, and try to use it as a precedent. I think that every situation, we need to judge every application we get based on the merits of that specific circumstance. If there was another lot, say a couple doors down, and they had a similar setup and doing the same thing, yeah, I mean, they would almost certainly point to this case and say, you did almost the exact same thing before, and it might be difficult to say no to another circumstance like that. There doesn't appear to be any other examples in the immediate area that would kind of fit the same mold as this. I think bottom line is the Planning Act says that we need to take every application and consider it on its own with its own merits and not look at precedent. That being said, I mean, people are going to look at the surrounding area, surrounding context matters, and it's impossible to say that it will never create a precedent, but I think that the risk is low in this area.
One question I had was if the M&R want to get involved, and they haven't been so far because of the landscaping has already taken place.
Mm-hmm.
Should we defer this until we get a report from both them and the Meadow Conservation Authority?
So the Conservation Authority said they actually don't have any objections to the application. They just want to point out the fact that there has been significant landscape alteration without permits. Okay. So I don't think that necessarily has any impact on the severance itself.
The M&R, because you mentioned that.
Well, the M&R, so say it goes through a process and they're required to do significant revegetation or alteration with silt and runoff modification, et cetera. That's all landscaping work that can be done and will be done regardless of whether it's one or two lots. I don't think it would have any bearing on the outcome of this application. I don't see it.
Okay, all right. Is the committee comfortable with that?
Yeah, going back to what you said about setting the precedents, and this is particularly unique because of the size of the lot. So if that's recorded, then the precedent not really set for smaller lots.
We underline the fact that it's individual assessed according to its own merits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right.
The fact that we discussed that and the decision was made on that basis.
Because I was with John, I was concerned.
Yeah, and I guess the same question could have been asked on, it's passed already, but the prior application, because that was an actually bigger one, but sometimes it makes sense. And so it is just a case of talking it through and understanding.
Yep, that's good. Anybody else? Lauren?
Well, I guess where I wonder about with setting a precedent and even going back further in time is now, what is the garage dwelling that's currently there? Is that one? Yeah.
This lot was previously severed and has been sold.
Right.
So this was originally marked, just so everyone can see what I'm pointing to. This was originally Mark and Donna's home, and Mark had a big garage off here.
Right.
So that was severed off within the last few years.
Okay.
And so that's what these structures are. I just show them because we had tied them in as part of doing.
Yeah.
the new proposed location for Mark and Donna's house is, is in this location. And then, of course, whoever purchases the lot, there is sufficient room here with the side yard setbacks to be able to construct close to the road. But if it's someone who wants additional privacy, same thing that Mark and Donna are doing, building further back on the property, they have that opportunity.
So I guess I wonder about this committee, when we decide to sever a property, is to have it on one side of a property or another, so we're not having wraparound properties, right? Because now we're creating this issue, so. So it would be like, because I'm thinking about Noswansing Park Road, we severed 2 lots there, and suddenly I go, did we do the same thing? Did we create a wraparound? I'm not sure, I'd have to go back.
One side.
They're on one side, okay. So it might be something that we have to sort of think about in the future going forward, is if we're severing, we kind of say, okay, let's not have these wraparound, so we don't have this issue.
I think that's a good point, yeah.
Right?
I agree with you. It looks a lot cleaner, the presentation.
Right,
And you haven't got, you're surrounded by someone else's property,
right.
both sides.
And then you also don't have 2 driveways, which, I mean, driveways, that's, additional. So I just, it's something for us, or for me to know.
Right.
Going forward.
They're all valid.
Okay, so I don't have a problem with this, but I think going forward, we should watch for that.
Frank, you have any concerns?
I'm good.
Sorry.
Sorry. I was just going to add to your point, though, that also though, future development of the lands and highest and best use of the land. So we also don't want to cut off a large portion in the rear that could never be developed and never put into productive land. So if, in the future, if that's, and that was one of the considerations here. Like I said in my presentation, we specifically left a 66-foot strip so that it would qualify as a full municipal road for future development of the lands, so that we weren't just isolating this to only 2 potential lots in the future, but that we could also develop the rear property and also potentially the landlocked properties to the rear of this in the future. So it was a little bit of long-term planning to have this. So if we put a policy that says we can never do this,
right,
then you might also be limiting what you can do in the future, of course, with that.
Tara, you have any concerns? You're good? Okay.
So I guess just is, so this, like, you didn't want to go on one side or the other, just because there'd be this L there.
Well, we also had the position of the garage in the existing house that we had to contend with as well in the original application.
Yeah.
So we ensured that they had their 60 meters of frontage. And now if the garage and the house were much closer together and were both pushed onto this side of the property, that would have been a different consideration entirely. But because they were basically right in the center of the property, but we're also horizontally separated in east-west direction, it kind of allowed this opportunity to permit for future development as well.
Any other questions from the committee? That's it. Any members of the public want to comment on this?
I just have a question. When you say, when in this case, you might have to say to the M&R during this process, for whatever reason, they have to confirm with them. They had a federal level of provision, was certainly not, no, are they? If you had to concur with the M&R.
So the M&R is a provincial ministry. They're a provincial ministry, Ministry of Natural Resources.
Prior to making the decision that provincial entity that have to deal with that decision, their concerns are factored into your decision, whether it's a yea or nay.
So in this case, the M&R has not been part of the process to date. I was just simply stating the fact that the North Bay Meadow Conservation Authority, who is circulated, highlighted the fact that this specific area was outside of their jurisdiction and they would be referring the matter to the MNR. So this is a bit of an out of the ordinary situation.
But if something was referred to the MNR, you had to deal with it. Is it unusual that you'd have to deal with something like that? And make your guys.
We deal with provincial ministries often. It's more often the Ministry of Transportation. But it very much depends on the circumstance. In this case, we discussed, and I don't think there's a need to delay the application for the MNR.
Yeah, and I'm not forgetting that. This is better.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if we're ready to vote, have a mover and seconder, please. Bill and John. All in favor? Very good.
Thank you. Am I next on the agenda?
You are. You're the
And I'll just stay comfortable right here.
you're the last man sitting. B 2023-19, Paul Goodrich on behalf of Alicia Way, 316 Deerland Road. The applicant's requesting consent to sever for the purpose of creating one new lot, 61.1 meters frontage, 2.58 hectares lot area.
Thank you very much. And I believe Lady is here with me this evening, as well as her father-in-law from Tessier, the separate lot from Alicia to her in-laws, so that they can build a home and be close by, and they can all look after them as he's getting even older. But the intention is, and once again, it's one of these, we don't get these wraparound properties, or you might get one every 15, 20 years of doing this, and I've got two on the same agenda here tonight. So you'll notice that the west end up against the unopened road allowance, in Student Trail that runs through that area. There is a small section of the property that wraps around the neighbor's house. It's about 20 feet wide at the road, and it basically runs more or less parallel through that area. I think probably it was done in the original survey to avoid having to run the road allowance to butt that original one right up road allowance, just because of the cost. At the time, this was done long before we had GPS technology. So I'm sure that it's 2 kilometers that you would have to run to get to the next point on the road allowance to try to establish that. I've had a crew out to the site since we made the application, and thank God for GPS. And anyway, this is what we're looking at doing. It is a bit of a different application in that we have the 60 meters of frontage required. In fact, we're a little bit in excess of the 60, but it's not all together. So we've got 6 meters or 6.1 meters of frontage on the west side of the existing house. And then we have a further 55 meters being proposed on the east side of the house. Now, when you look at the property initially, with just what's left, of course, the question came up from Greg immediately when we were proposing this was, well, why can't we simply just do this 60 on the other side of the house? And yes, there is room there for it. It's always been Alicia and her husband. Sorry, I forget. Thank you. I'm getting horrible. I was never good with names to begin with. But anyway, it was always their goal when they purchased the home and fix it up. And in time when they're permitted, they would sever off and sell the property that they're currently living in, home there, and build sort of the dream home next door on the property and be able to stay on the property. So when we look at where the structures, once again, it comes down to where the structures are located on the property, in order to have the 60 meters of frontage required for that future lot that would be created, and still have the side yard setbacks from the existing house, that condense that area that we have left to be able to work with. So that's why we've got 55 on one side and the 6 on the other. And back to your other point about setting precedents about narrow lots, with the previous application, there's no way we would be able to build within that 66-foot strip. We always would have had to build at the rear, because with an 8-meter setback on either side and only 20 available, you've only got 4 meters left for your house. In other words, you have a nice long hallway and that's about it. In this case, even if he and his wife are going to build down closer to the road, we still have 55 meters, but it is their intention. So one thing I don't like about doing 100 acres lots, it's just everything is so condensed, it's hard to show everything in scale. But basically at the bottom of the last E and severed is the preferred house location where they want to build their home. Alicia likes that as well, because with the way the bush wraps around in that area, she won't see the house from her house. They'll know they're there, but it doesn't really impact it on their enjoyment property and the nice big open yard that they have just west of the house. So that's essentially the application. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions by the committee?
Just only, it's a really good point. And I've never thought of that. Is there anything that says it has to be consistent?
Like together, you mean?
Yeah, like
No.
consistent 60 meters.
Well, but I think it's wait, what if you had, 10, 6 feet on wide?
Never used it,
60 meters, so.
but certainly at the 55, it's very significant. The one section. Yeah. Interesting.
Steve, how about you? Tara, how about yourself? Okay. Bill?
No questions.
I was. I'll ask for your report first, please.
Sure. Do you want to go to the public first?
Sure. Is there anyone in the public that has anything to say about this?
I'm on the west side where this road is proposed.
Okay.
At that 30-foot area, the sort of you're talking about.
Yep.
Notwithstanding Alicia's greenhouse and all that stuff, and your question about, it appears to me there's no regulations on what a frontage requires to put in with this house. I think make that clear. It doesn't matter whether it's 30 feet, 60 feet, 10 blocks, or 10 feet, like you explained. Am I getting that right?
Not exactly.
Well, what I'm getting at is I have an entitlement to protect my property, the boundaries of my property, and it's not clear yet. That's why I'm trying to ask this the best way.
Sure.
If I'm hearing that, well, yeah, there's 60 meters of frontage, but we're going to use that, say, 5 meters of frontage to put the driveway beside my driveway, because we can. Isn't it because we can, or are there rules and regulations saying, yeah, we can, and there's no rule saying we can't? I mean, in order for a citizen to be able to protect his property, he would have to know that the rules are, you guys are basing your decision on to make that happen. So, and that's why I kind of got ahead of myself asking the question about outside entities. I knew federal authorities or provincial authorities. Quite none from the information that I need, and I'm prepared to give the council. I'd like to give the council the copy of the reference material. I'm keeping on this matter, which both at the prevention of federal level. Notwithstanding the fact that it appears that you only need 30 meters or 30 feet with a driveway beside mine, when you got 89 meters on the other side. You're still federal prevention rules that say, well, wait a minute, you can cut that close. Nobody has the right to cut a tree down if it's straight in the middle, and I would submit based on what I've seen and heard so far, and discussed with the neighbors. We're walking that real fine line that the survey is talking about. So, in all fairness to where this proposed driveway is going in. It's still 89, like he said, the other 60 meters on that side, greenhouse or not, Why would you do that allocation in that council was talking about when I pretty assessment there. Now, if there isn't anything legal that I can protect myself against and get these answers, that's a different story. I just have to be told that. So that's why I would like to provide the council with my record material, just so I have a peace of mind knowing that, okay, if you make the decision to allow the severance to happen, I'm not going to get any necessarily negative feedback if I feel based on your decision and your review of the same rules that I'm making, that I can then address that. I can't address anything to protect my property at this time until I know which way where the rules are going to be applied. I'm not asking to change or try to change the system, but I respectfully like to submit my record material just so I know I'm not continuing from access to potential or provincial rules that are a little bit above what you guys are dealing with. But like the M&R example you talked about, sometimes you do have to confer with provincial and or provincial on such a matter. Generally that doesn't happen, and that's what I've heard in the last few years, about how to do that, but sometimes you do. And I agree with council, this is the perfect example. Why would you do this wraparound thing and you got 89 acres to build pretty small anyway? And that's not perfect. I'm just saying.
Yep, that's fine. Thank you.
I need the room to understand the program. And that's why I just like to submit the references for consideration. And I can wait. But I'd like to be advised on the plan. At the very least, should that decision be made in favor of the applicant for severance? I think at a very minimum, at least on a principle, I would be able to at least have a site development plan presented to me to satisfy at least that part, but that's how we shape some of the consideration on the other record.
Thank you. We'll hear from staff.
Sure, I can clarify a few things. So I think the neighbor, sorry, I missed your name.
Jamie Brown.
Jamie Brown. Okay, so I think Mr. Brown might be I think confusing a few processes together. So when we're talking about like the placement of a driveway, say, and like the trees that would need to be cut down for it, I think he may be referring to legislation around cutting of trees on property lines, or there's a gray area about where root systems go over property lines, et cetera. That's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about the severance. The severance is a separate process from provincial tree protection laws. So what we're talking about in the severance is zoning bylaw requirements for lot frontage and lot area and how that's created. So yes, the two would happen together, but they're separate processes. So when I say that the thing about the M&R not necessarily applying to the process we're going through, it's because this committee isn't specifically ruling on some type of provincial law related to where trees are, et cetera. And this law already exists in a wraparound state, so we're not trying to create that. So I think that's not really a concern. So when it comes to law, we're specifically looking at our policies as to whether that lot is appropriate, meets the standards, et cetera, et cetera. Being said, we should also consider context in the area and kind of general planning principles. And I mean, the neighbor's point about the driveway being in that location on the very narrow area when there is a large additional area, that's something that the committee could consider. And I mean, we've talked about this lots. I've talked with the applicants about this in the past as well. I know that they have a preference for a driveway there. But if the committee feels that that is going to negatively impact the neighbor in a way that it shouldn't, there are ways that the committee can deal with that. It is possible to put a condition on the approval that they enter into a development agreement about the location of the driveway. I've looked into like legalities around conditions like that, and there doesn't appear to be any restriction in the Planning Act on a condition that would dictate a driveway location through a development agreement. So, I mean, we don't have any specific policies that outline where driveways should go. Kind of general development principles to consider and impact on adjacent neighbors can factor into it. So, I mean, those are things that the committee should consider when they make their decision.
Would that come into play though, for instance, when they go to get a permit, would that come into play at that point? Because really what we're looking at is severance as opposed to driveway and house location, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so the way you would do it is you wouldn't be able to put a condition on the application that the driveway be in a certain location because as soon as you issue the certificate after the conditions are satisfied, you can't really bind them to anything that's in there. Like they have to satisfy all those conditions before you issue the certificate to create the lot, right? So the way you have to do it for things like this is the condition would have to be that the applicant enter into a development agreement for such purpose. And then we would draft an agreement with the applicant. It would have to be signed by both parties, and that agreement would be registered and bound, and that would bind them to the location of the driveway. So that would mean that they could satisfy their conditions of the severance. We issue the certificate, they create the lot, and then later, then they would be bound by that. It was registered through the condition process. So that's the mechanism.
If,
Going back again, if there's no municipal regulation, whether it's 20 feet, it's enough to put a building or something, or 50 meters, and you still don't have any provisions above and beyond that, let's just say you decide to put the road inside my place. Well, what are the rules that the people develop in that roadway, driveway, whatever they have no rules, they have no, I know there's been an environmental assessment, it's not applicable, but there's no other municipal rules that should be taken into consideration at all, other than the fact that it's
John,
40 meters to 60.
thank you, John.
But a point of clarification for me. Between the lot that is proposed for severance with the small meterage path, there is also a road allowance.
Yes.
And then your place. So they're not impacting.
No, okay. Sir, it's now in the committee's hands. Thank you.
So that really is the width of the permit is governed by the municipality, right? The roads department, I'm assuming, issue an entrance permit or a permit for a property, which handles that process. In my time on committee and hear from anybody else, I've never heard of a development condition on an application, being put on an application or an approval for severance.
We haven't done many, no, it's not that common in East Ferris, but it is something that's done in other municipalities. Yeah, so as far as the actual process for getting an entrance, you are right, the municipality issues entrance permits. That's done by our Director of Public Works. So he looks at sight lines and things like that.
Proximity to
has approached our Director of Public Works about entrance permits already. And he has identified that both locations on either side of the neighbor's property would be suitable for sightlines and other kind of technical requirements. So I think this is more of a question of kind of general planning principles and whether that's an appropriate location or not.
If I may, if everyone go to the staff's report on this, and if you look at under official plan and zoning bylaw, if you look at the last paragraph, I can read it. For this reason, if the committee deems it appropriate to approve the application, they may wish to include an additional condition related to the location of any future driveway that is constructed on the severed lands. The most appropriate way to accomplish this would be to require a development agreement when development takes place.
In that case, if the intention is to keep the driveway on the larger section of
Yes,
the applicants,
Yep.
the agreement can be entered into.
we can enter into an
The
agreement.
question is, where are you intending to put your driveway?
Initially, it was on the 6 meter to 20 foot section. In fact, I believe Mr. Tessie approached the township even about being able to use road allowance portion that's not open right now as an access point in, but of course it's during the winter months, it's the Skidoo Trail, so there were some safety issues with respect to that. The reason for putting it on that side of the property was that it is Alicia's property, and although she's willing to do this for her in-laws, she's trying to have as little impact on their use and enjoyment of the property as possible. So in that respect, it was better to put it on the far side so that there was some separation through that area. And in future, if any of the rules change, then some of that other land could become still available to her as a lot addition back on for their house construction.
Yeah.
And so then they don't want to have to build a new house with a driveway right next to where they want to put their house as well. There are lots of areas, you have semi-detached homes where you have twin driveways out to a road. There really isn't any safety issue with respect to that. It's just whether or not it can be located there. Also, at that end of the property, the land is a little bit higher and drier than what it is on the other side of Mr. Brown's property. So as far as driveway construction, it's a little easier to build on that side, a little cheaper to build on that side as well, rather than having to put a strong rock base on the other side to support the driveway. The agreement, like we're not totally opposed to the development agreement as long as it is an agreement, so that between the staff and Mr. Dessier, that they can come to an agreement as to where it should be placed, and with all considerations taken into account. So if the agreement is there, but as long as the condition doesn't state that the agreement is only to ensure that the driveway is on this side of the property in one specific location. So we'd like a little bit of flexibility, perhaps negotiating up with staff at the appropriate time they're going to build it. So,
and forgive me if I'm, it's redundant, but that's the process that takes place now.
So I would say that if Mr. Goodrich is requesting that it be an open-ended agreement, I guess stepping back a second, I think what the committee needs to consider in your decision is whether the location of the driveway is something you care to govern. And if so, then you would need to specify that the agreement is entered into and that it says the driveway has to be on the easterly side. Because if you're going to leave it open and say that it can be anywhere, then just don't put the condition on, because it kind of defeats the purpose, because our entrance permit process would handle all the technical aspects. So I say it really depends on how much the committee feels that the driveway location matters in the grand scheme of things.
We weren't aware of it until now. There was some objections.
Yeah.
And you can see that point. So now we're aware of it. It's a dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just try and sever the line, because if we're here to make the decision of does it meet the criteria? And yes, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know that it's going to cause a problem, a dispute or something in the future. Dilemma.
Bill, consensus, what's your thoughts?
I personally think a location will be, as far as driveway goes, will be dealt with when applications actually put in to build on the property. My belief is at this point, we're looking at severance of a lot, we're not looking at building a home. If we sever a lot and there's not appropriate footage, whatever it may be, square footage, we sever a lot off and they can't physically put a driveway into it. That's not what we're looking at. At this point.
Sure, that's fine. Sorry, you have thoughts?
Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
I'm just wondering if we get past this stage, when there is someone who's looking at where they can put the driveway in, will there be an opportunity for the public to comment at that time, or is this their only opportunity right now?
This is the only public the only public part of this process. The entrance permit process is not a public process and not governed by the Planning Act or anything that requires public consultation.
Okay, so that's why it would be important for us to consider the public's input right now, and any points that they have, so that when they do get into it, we're sort of speaking for them at that point.
Yes, it's worth consideration. That's my personal thought. Yes.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the process beyond. So as far as trees and minimum requirements, that I don't know what those are, but I would assume the people who would approve it would. But if they don't take into account a neighbor's concern, then that's a bit of our concern.
Thanks, Tara. Lauren?
Yeah, and I drove by, and so I don't want to, when I was looking at this, I didn't see I thought it was the road allowance that they wanted to build the driveway. I didn't, so suddenly now I'm zooming in and I see this little strip. And I think that has to be considered. I think, because when I'm hearing this, he doesn't want the driveway right beside his driveway.
Right.
And she doesn't want the driveway interfering with her property either. So I think we need to put in the developmental, whatever it was that, so that we're handling this dispute now. So I would say, I would be in agreement to put, and it needs to be on the 55 meter side, not the 10 meters.
That's if I say something, that's fine. I agree with that. So,
Right,
okay.
yeah,
Because otherwise we got to keep going and it's going to be ongoing.
right.
Frank, what's your thoughts?
The only question I have is that the municipality has been out there and looked at both pieces for the driveway, and they're okay with either or.
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, our Director of Public Works has had pre-consultation with the applicant on this as well. And there are no technical concerns as far as sightline issues or safety issues with the driveway in either location. So it could. I think we got another person, the applicant is up there.
Yes.
So as Paul noted, my husband and I are hoping to sever another lot in the future for us to build our home on that 55 meter side. So either way, there's gonna be a driveway there, like
Beside his home.
Like right now, we live in the current house, which eventually we do want to sever off, and then we want to build a house. They're building on the property that we're severing off right now, but eventually I would like to build a home too in that remaining property.
Can we ask questions of her? Okay, yes. I'll let you guys talk at it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that in terms of that question, I don't feel this committee should be governing over driveway locations. Simply.
Okay, John. Yep. Well, how do you feel, Sam?
Basically, yeah.
Yes, Steve?
So you're severing this piece of land and then you want to sever again in the future, you build another big property.
Well, they want to sever off the existing house, leave the retained land with all the land in back. But essentially it would create that other building site immediately west of their existing home. So instead of severing off the piece in the middle, they'll actually sever off around the existing house, which has the same effect, really. We'll wind up with east of the Brown's house, we would wind up with basically three lots along the road in that area. And lots of frontage to do that. And in fact, the retained, or if they severed the existing, it would have well in excess of 60 meters simply because of where the house is now located. You can't just pull the house over. So that's the issue there.
Frank,
It's just a comment. I can appreciate the fact that they may want to sever another piece of property later on down the road or not. But tonight we're dealing with this piece of property and I think it should remain with that.
The applicant was asked though, future development, so. Yeah, it was answered the question, but you're right. Yep. Bill, anything to add? Anybody have anything to add?
Again, there is an unmanaged road that exists between the properties. So if I have a piece of property and I want to build a driveway on it, and I respect everybody's opinion to be heard and to ask questions, you're not interfering with the applicant's property. And the municipality has, if there was a technical issue, they would say, yeah, no, driveway can't go there. It's got to go somewhere else. That's not what they're saying. So to try to govern it differently is
Okay,
same thing.
no, good opinion.
I agree.
Okay, all right. We have a moving or second then, please. All in favor?
What are we voting on? Sorry. Maybe clarified. Just the severance.
Not putting in the phrase about having to
The approval of the severance.
where the driveway goes. There's nothing, there's no reference to where the
Get the driveway over there or?
we're dealing with strictly with the severance.
Yeah, we're just dealing with the severance.
Well, in that service, we have to be applying in.
Not to say, even if you just do the action permit one.
Yeah, and then that's when you tell me I couldn't have it too.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to bring something up. I offered Mr. Brown, buy the piece of property. Which, you know, he doesn't have to buy it. Get paid for the survey, switch it over, I feel and if he's not that concerned, if you just have to pay surveyor to switch it over for the drivers. Just so I don't understand.
Okay.
Just how you create that option to.
Okay, sir.
Did we get clarification on what that means?
So basically, because we have a 6-meter piece on this, Mr. Brown owns a very wide piece of property, his house and driveway are at the west end of it. So what he had offered was, we'll do a lot addition of this 6 meters on your existing property. And you give me the 6 meters at the end of your property, because there's additional costs in building the driveway on that side. He asked for Mr. Brown to cover the survey costs of doing that. And, you know, any of the, you know, because we'd have to come back for a lot of addition severance in that case, cover those just as cost, but no real money for the value of the land. Okay, but so we did try to resolve this between the two neighbors.
Yeah.
Or they did ahead of time, but it wasn't an option that was chosen.
Okay,
So if that's going to be taken into consideration, that should be able to respond to your section, but not.
you know, I think we're, quite frankly, I think we're ready to vote, if I'm not mistaken. Do you want to hear the
I'm good with hearing.
addition?
I'm good with other.
I've got 2 points. One to Matt was, if you look at the picture, he supposed it offers either way. One driveway is going beside mine and the other one's coming in my property. This offer that was made up.
Sure.
Well, then we'll just put in another 30 meters or 30 feet or 60 feet into your property on the other side. So either way, we're stuck with 30 feet, whether and what I was specifically told was by Mr. Pesce was that the price we would The price we have to pay would be the surveyor who's doing the work now, that's a total separate bid, so in other words. And actually, it was my wife who didn't have the conversation. My wife was willing to split that cost because she so feels that she really doesn't want that little bit of space broken up between the access road and our place, a little bit greater.
Okay,
But that got turned down because Mr. Secretary didn't want to incur any cost. And the fact of it is, the only reason, notwithstanding what Alicia's saying about the green phone, they just bought them a $500,000 farm and the green phone. But yes, that's their business.
okay.
I got no issue with that. But when I'm told by the same people who were saying they tried to negotiate with me, that the only reason they're doing it is because he didn't want to pay the $3,000 or $10,000. It'll cost him to put Phil in a perfectly open field that would bring the road to that 60-yard coverage.
Very good.
You guys gotta separate the beef and the cow. Outweigh. It was brought up, I had a chance to, so if we want to go down those roads, we can.
Thank you.
What I'm asking is if these references are taken into consideration with the rest of the conversations we had. I'll be happy to.
Thank you for your input. So time for the committee. How would the vote stand, please?
Well, we should go around the table.
We have a mover and a seconder.
Yes.
Who is in favor, please?
For the second or.
So that's 4. That's a majority.
Okay.
And Tara.
And Tara, you voted for, right? Sorry, Tara, I'm not used to watching on the TV. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
You already got it on file, don't you? That's how you say that.
It's a lot of what we're dealing with and the committee deals with on a regular basis. I know on the lakes especially, they're dealing with small lots and there was a lot of houses. And on both lakes, there's a handful of cottages left. And they're permanent dwellings. That's why we had the 1 mile road issue and these issues are ongoing. And now we've got farms that are sitting lying fallow and there's a chance to, and quite frankly, there's a housing shortage crisis. Well, they're all mitigating factors. At any rate, we have any course, thank you very much for your presentation, Paul. Correspondence. Can I have a mover and seconder for adjournment, please?
Prior to.
Sure.
In.
Yep.
In past, people made a presentation. Back maybe 4 years. Presenter always had it on the wall. So it'd be on a whatever. And then we could follow what the presenter was presenting to us, as opposed to trying to listen and follow here,
Yeah.
you know? And it's something I think.
Would be advantageous. It would be advantageous.
So we've done that in the past when the applicant has specifically requested it. So when we had some of our like bigger subdivision applications, for example, the applicant has requested use of the projector. So we've generally done it on a like request basis and not ask people to do it. As far as I
think it's something the municipality does, is it not? And then the presenter just comes up and.
We could, if you'd like us to have the ability to show like maps and documents, we could use that for that in the future. Yep.
And that's.
I think so. I think
We've done it.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea.
It's easier to see some of those details.
Yeah.
Without having to.
And when I find looking around the table, I see different people looking at different areas.
Yeah.
And we'd be able to concentrate on the one area and one explanation.
Bigger.
I think it would be easier to, because some of these two have been complex. They have been wraparounds.
More to them.
They are, you know, yeah. So I like the idea, Frank.
Okay, yeah, we can make that happen, yeah.
Okay, and that way, and then I think for Greg, and if you, for your presentation would be ideal.
The very one thrown out now, or is it going to be?
If you'd like to circulate to have it as part of the record, we can. The committee's made their decision on the application already, though. Yeah. We can take it for the file or one copy anyways, if you'd like. Sure.
No, I like the idea, Frank. Personally, I do, yeah. And it would give Greg, I think it would be better for him because he would be able to stand up almost like with a pointer and highlight the main points. I like the idea. You're good with that, Steve?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Rick Miller?
Yes. Yes, he always does. It's very appropriate. And it's right on the money. And it looks more professional too. Presentation is excellent. We got to adjourn. Yeah. Move to second to adjourn, please. We got Frank. Oh, thanks, Bob.
So Terry, that last one, I'm not.
That's fine.
That is the property.
You didn't vote for it.
That's fine.
Okay, fine.
And meets,
Steve,
Thanks, Sarah.
Oh, okay.
We're posting the YouTube now, so.
Okay.
this is one that